Board of Adjustment.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and call the September Board of Adjustment meeting to order. We'll start by taking the roll on that. Josh, would you mind taking care of calling the roll for us tonight for the record?
Don Jackmore,
Yes.
Wendell Miller,
Here.
Justin Cawthon, absent. Wayne Cummings,
Here.
Josh Stroud, here.
We do have quorum. Okay. All right. We start off with the normal housekeeping item for the month is approving the minutes from our previous meeting, our meetings here. Commissioners, what is your pleasure?
Move we accept as written.
Okay.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. We don't have any old business, but we have new. We have variance to Article 3.226, or 22.6, site design regard the planning and connectivity requirements. Article 3.23, sidewalk construction, and Article 5.8 to the street frontage buffer for property located at 3000 East H, submitted by MMSM Properties LLC. Sarah, you got a staff report on that?
Absolutely, yes. As stated, this is a variance request from some parking and connectivity, sidewalk, and the street frontage buffer. This is the location of the new Focus Fitness that has just opened. The area is all zoned C2 highway commercial, and there are a variety of businesses right in this area, One Roof, Russellville Family Funeral, Sonic, along with some other offices on Northampton. First, I wanted to start with what was the approved site plan, and then we have received a constructed site plan with this application, highlighted where the variance applications are. So you'll see that they had a driveway shown to the adjacent property. They also had their landscaping at the street frontage buffer and the sidewalk on H Street. And then under the constructed site plan, I highlight where they've added parking, which was not shown on the original site plan that was approved at time of building permit application. So there are 4 different variance requests with this application. I'm going to go through each one. So the first request is to waive the requirement to construct sidewalks along H Street. The applicant has indicated that the proposed sidewalk would have limited functionality as it would not connect to any existing paths and would be obstructed by our fire hydrant and fire suppression connection just west of the property, that's what is shown in the picture above. And then there are additional construction challenges beyond this property related to the fire hydrant. I just said that, so sorry. Apparently I read this and skipped over that sentence. So that all would necessitate further infrastructure adjustments if the sidewalk were to be extended beyond the property lines. The second request is to waive the requirement for cross connectivity through a driveway connection, as the proposed connection conflicts with an existing above ground fiber optics box in the object area. Although the original plans did not indicate any potential conflicts, as shown, they did show that the driveway was there. We did not see any conflicts in what was approved. And the applicant has noted this issue and suggests that customers can still park at the Russell Family Funeral parking lot and walk over to the business, although no route has been provided for that. And you can actually, I have one, yeah, this picture, you can see they are parking over at Russellville Family Funeral, and they are walking over across the landscaped area to get to the Focus Fitness. So the third request pertains to landscaping requirements regarding the street frontage buffer. The applicant opted to relocate the street frontage landscaping buffer adjacent to their building to reduce maintenance. So sorry, that'll keep popping up. The purpose of the street frontage buffer is to create an aesthetically pleasing transition from the right-of-way to the property. While the applicant has met the requirement for the number of shrubs planted on the property, relocating the landscaping to the building's perimeter has diminished the intended softer transition provided by the original street frontage buffer. Then finally, the fourth request involves the location of parking between the building and the right-of-way. According to code, parking should primarily be situated to the sides and rear of the building, along with landscaping to ensure an aesthetically pleasing transition from the right-of-way to the business. The applicant has indicated that additional space was needed to accommodate the growing business and therefore adjusted the parking layout. Insufficient evidence was submitted to provide a recommendation of approval. It appears that the applicant has encountered practical challenges that led to deviations from the original plans and regulations. However, these challenges, such as the need for additional parking spaces, the relocation of landscaping for maintenance reasons, and the conflict with existing infrastructure, were addressed without prior consultation with the city or consideration of the relevant regulations. While the applicant has provided some explanations for these changes, they do not clearly demonstrate sufficient reasons to justify a variance from the regulations. An approval could be made with conditions to ensure any deviations are minimized and overall harmony with the regulations are maintained. That is my staff report. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Sarah? Is there, you got anything to add or to that? You could step forward, yeah, if you would go to the microphone and state your name for the record, please. Sir? Yes, we are. Yeah, comb your hair.
Well, you need to check those out before you say anything. You know, one of the things that we were doing.
Record, if you would.
Sir?
State your name for the record, if you would.
Oh, Mike Miller.
Okay.
We own the property that's in discussion here. You know, one of the problems is when you're dealing with any cities, and Russellville is certainly no exception, there's certain rules and stuff in there that you try to apply to. The problem is that, you know, Sarah really gets a bad name from me and everybody else, unjustifiably. And let me tell you why. These regulations that we're putting in there don't have enough variance in them, and they're made for big city type things. We're not a big city. We're a rural city. You know, I'm doing a big project in North Little Rock. Their regulations are very similar. What they ask us to do down there, we go through and we did everything we could. The difference in Russellville and there, though, we went in and asked for a variance, and our variances were, they didn't even go for the quorum down there. Basically, they accepted because we're not building in a downtown city. We're out on the east side of 440, and it's an industrial area. You know, where we're at up there now, if you look at all the sidewalks that are put in up there, you know, most of those, in fact, all of those were not paid by the people that built in the building. They were done by the city. Now, do they pay more taxes than I do so that they can get free sidewalks, or do I have to support my own? What Sarah's issue is our rules need to be changed so that they're made applicable to wherever the buildings are being built. And if you can change those, and the quorum court is certainly the only one that can change that, they need to be changed to make it conducive for us to come in and spend our money here. And these variants that we're asking for right now, quite frankly, whenever we did the design on the building, as you go along, you figure out ways that makes things better. And one of the things is that driveway from the funeral building versus to this parking lot. We thought, and I was the one that said, we need a driveway through to make it easy to get through. The problem is when you do that, it makes people go into the fitness center, park in the funeral home parking lot, and because you've got to drive through there. So we thought if we don't have one through there, you stop some of that. The other thing it also does, it makes people at a funeral wanting to park in the other place fit. The nice thing about it is we own both pieces of property, and we think it's better if they stay separate until it's needed. So whenever the Focus Fitness people needs the parking, they can certainly park in the funeral home. But when the funeral home is having a funeral and they need all the parking, then they need to be parked in the other place. The fortunate thing for us, most times the fitness and the funerals don't take place at the same time. But we particularly don't want a driveway through there to make it conducive for everybody to park wherever they want to. And so when you get into it, you see what's going on. It's the same thing with the trees that we had in there. When we had all the trees in there, the other thing is, you know, me personally, I look at cost. You all should be looking at cost too, because that cost that you're looking at is determines whether people comes in and build here. If you look at the trees that are spec, they all have to be 3 inches in diameter. When they're 3 inches in diameter, first of all, they don't live very well because they're too big. The other thing is a 3-inch tree right now costs $300 to $400 per tree. So, you know, we don't have to have instant success here. So if you plant a smaller tree, obviously it's going to get bigger. So y'all need to look at the cost of these people doing these things and make these variances either much easier or go back and change the rules. Maybe you need to do a little bit of both. And the request that we're doing here will certainly not diminish in the appearance of our building or the functionality of it. You know, the problem is that for whatever reason, they were very successful on their first weekend of open. They signed 90 new members that did not belong to that organization before. When you sign up, the number of people they got, they certainly need more parking. Now, when you say need more parking, it's like every business. Every time we put a business in, that first day it opens, everybody wants to go see what it is. And then the business tapers off, and usually it drops more than it should, and then typically it comes back. Well, we want every business that comes in here to be successful because that's the only way they're going to keep coming. And my whole goal, and I hope it's yours the same, is to make our town continue to grow. Because the bigger we get, the more amenities we have for everybody to share. And so what we're asking for, I don't think is really unreasonable at all. And we certainly don't want to degrade our facilities or our community. You know, the sidewalks they don't go anywhere. I mean, what are you going to do, walk back and forth in front of our building on the sidewalk? I mean, you know, I talked to the mayor, and because I was frustrated, and, you know, they're going to put sidewalks in from that corner up there all the way down to Parkway. And I think that's great. But, you know, it may be 10 years because I don't think that sidewalk's going to be on a high priority of where we put sidewalks in. So when they do, and it feels like it needs to be done, we certainly don't object to it. We object to the money it costs for us to do all this. Now, y'all got any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sarah, you want to, is there anything you need to add? Or
I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Can you pull that, the pictures up?
Yeah.
That showed before. What is that building built right now?
Oh, yes, sir. This
Okay, I
is the
Thought
building.
it was.
This is Focus Fitness. It has opened. It's very busy.
But what are we wanting him to do? Like,
So, as you can see from the approved site plan here, the code requires cross connectivity between parking lots. The intent is that you would have a driveway. That is what was shown and what is approved.
Okay.
It doesn't specifically specify that it has to be a driveway, but it does require cross connectivity. And if people are parking in the family funeral, it could be that that there's a sidewalk provided between the parking lots, so there's maybe a designated spot, so they're not necessarily creating mud in the new landscaping area. That could be a possible solution for that. The landscaping, I don't know, can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay, so this landscaping here, I believe, was moved to close to the building from what has been indicated. I did not get pictures of that. So sorry, I did not reboot this before the meeting to show that the landscaping is there, but the applicant has indicated that they planted the required number of shrubs and the required number of trees. They just moved them from East H Street closer to the building. The intent was that it would help provide a transition, kind of make it softer. The biggest thing is that the parking initially, the maximum amount of parking you're supposed to have in front of a building is no more than, or less than 50% of the overall parking for the property. And the intent was because we wanted buildings to be closer to the property line up front, so that buildings are, it's more of a human scale when it's closer to the property line versus farther away, minimizing the sea of parking areas that we are familiar with in the community. So those were the things that he has shown on here. There is constructability issues with the sidewalk continuing down H Street, as I indicated, so that variance seems like a reasonable request, because the city surely is not going to make it a high priority to go change a standpipe and a fire hydrant location, or relocate potentially a sewer. There's a sewer manhole as well. So there are some constructability issues as you continue down H Street that makes that request reasonable. I think the biggest thing, because they're not going to move the landscaping up closer, is to somehow figure out some connectivity options for between the funeral home and Focus Fitness, even if it's not necessarily a driveway. If there's some sort of connectivity, because they are walking back and forth, and we would like to see the landscaping that they did provide survive.
He has a very good point, though, on the size of the trees. I mean, that if you plant a bigger one like that, then it's a lot better if you have a smaller tree. I mean, can you give us some input on how our flexibility on that?
Currently, that's not a request that he's asking under this variance. It is something that the Long Range Planning Committee could consider future forward. I know when we were discussing landscaping with the zone code updates, that we did not go with what some communities have 4 or 6 inch diameters, because we understood the cost on that. So we went with a 3 inch. Felt like that was a little bit more of a compromise, more reasonable, but it's definitely, I have a list of items that the Long Range Planning Committee will be considering. Hopefully, we will be meeting in September. Sorry, it's been a little bit busy, but that way something would potentially be brought before the commission in October to consider some updates. But there have been items that have been identified that we do need to discuss and potentially make some amendments to the zone code.
When you're talking about the connectivity, like what kind of distance are we talking about?
I think there's 10 feet between parking.
Yeah, it's about 4.
Oh, yes, come on up. Well,
He's fine, he's fine. Go ahead.
Basically, there's a parking lot that's paved, and in between those
Sarah, I misunderstood on the landscaping. The shrubs are what was not done.
Correct. The
They're-
shrubs
okay.
were moved. They did plant the trees as shown on the site plan, but they moved the shrubs back.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you think that maybe some flagstone, like every 3 or 4 feet along that strip would, I mean, I'm talking big flags, you know what I mean? Where you're talking about somebody's gonna take the path of least resistance. If there's, I'm just trying to come up with a compromise, you know what I mean?
Commissioners, any more questions for Sarah or for Mr. Miller?
So a sidewalk would be connectivity. It would meet the code then. Okay.
Yes, since the code is not specific to a driveway, it just talks about connectivity, I do believe it would meet at least the intent to have some connectivity. I know in the section of that code that it is referring to a driveway, but ultimately the intent is to have connectivity.
I think connectivity with a sidewalk would eliminate a lot of problems. I think it would be more handicap accessible if they chose to walk across there. It'd be
They
easier
have
to maintain.
ADA spaces in front of.
Yeah, I saw that.
So there are 2 spaces that do meet ADA requirements.
Right.
So it wouldn't be an ADA issue if they had something to connect the 2 parking areas.
Why do they need connectivity to meet the 2 parking lots? If it's not for traffic purposes,
Well,
why is that?
Ideally, it is for traffic purposes, but if you're still trying to come up, if you're trying to come up with a compromise to show that you were trying to meet the intent of the code to provide the connectivity, at least some sort of transportation to try and meet that would be a compromise somewhere. Ideally, the intent is to have a driveway. They didn't construct a driveway, and if we're saying they don't have to construct the driveway, but we would like some form of connectivity, there are some other options.
Those options being what?
You could put, like Mike said, some stepping stones, maybe between some of the parking spaces, so that there's some connectivity there. That would be an option. You could put in a sidewalk, but I think if you put in a sidewalk, you would actually have to show how they're gonna get from that sidewalk to the entrance, and so then you'd potentially have to rearrange their parking to provide a
So-
walkway.
Sounds like overkill to me. I mean, that's.
Well, yeah, but, one thing about it, I mean, if you did put in, some of the concrete landscaping stones, they'd be low enough most of the time you could mow over them. But, I see we've got a conundrum with the code. And so, it sounds like overkill, but, I see where Sarah comes from too.
Say it again?
You couldn't build the driveway? Connectivity. You'd have to ask who wrote the code.
Sarah? What's your comment to that?
Well, connectivity does help so that people don't necessarily have to drive out onto other properties. It's too late here. Even if ownership wasn't a thing, at the time of the building permit, it still would have had a stub out shown to provide that connectivity.
Pull that back up again if you would.
The site plans,
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking too, Sarah. I mean, it would probably require any building going in to make
to at least provide the
Appropriation.
connection so that
Yeah.
at some future point that there could be
that
connectivity.
connect.
A lot of people drive from one business to another business and just to go out of a parking lot because sometimes we don't necessarily like to walk from one spot to another. But
And then I see Mike's
Your
point
call.
about if you got a funeral going on, you don't want a bunch of traffic going through there either, so.
But if you're going to the fitness center, you're going there to probably get on a treadmill anyway, so what's, it's, I don't know. I don't think it's an issue. Guys, anybody got any questions? What is your pleasure?
Right now, they're operating under a temporary, okay.
I'd like to make a motion to, let's just meet halfway on this. If we want connectivity, then I think flagstones would be the cheapest, and it would look nice, and it would benefit both parties and be reasonable fit for the property.
It's functional, yeah.
That's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. And to approve under these conditions. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. All right. Okay, all right. Item number 2. Variance to Article 4.1 regarding the height of the fence required front yard Glenwood House located at 318 South Glenwood, submitted by Russellville Housing Authority. Sarah, take it away.
yes, sir. So this is a variance from the height requirement for a fence in the front yard. In the front yard, fences are not permitted to be in the required front yard. So 25 feet from the road towards the structure. So they could build a 6-foot fence up to that 25 foot and then would have to reduce it. So this is to allow a 6-foot fence along their property line in the front yard. So this is the Glenwood House. It is a Russellville Housing Authority property. It is zoned R3, medium-density residential. There is a mixture of single-family, duplex, triplex. There's this apartment, a few churches. A music store was located to the south, and there's a dental clinic to the east. The dental clinic is zoned C4, neighborhood and quiet business. The music store is zoned C2, highway commercial. Properties along 2nd Street to the north are a mix of commercial and residential. The review comments are that first one, applicant demonstrates that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved and which are not applicable to other lands. The apartment is situated at the rear of the property with the entire usable yard space located in front of the building. Parking is positioned to the north side of the building, and the paved service yard is behind it, leaving the front yard as the only open green space for tenants. The Housing Authority proposes to fence in this front yard area to create a safe and inviting space for tenants and their pets. Due to zoning and site requirements, the location of the fence was revised to position the fence no closer than 12 feet from the roadway, ensuring compliance with both the minimum distance requirements from a street and the vision clearance triangle for people pulling off of 4th Street, or, yeah, I think that's 3rd or 4th, onto Glenwood. The applicant has demonstrated that special conditions exist due to the unique layout of the site, leaving only the front yard as the usable portion of the property for tenant enjoyment. And documentation was provided that supports the goal of creating a safe, inviting, and functional outdoor space for tenants in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the regulations. So it is the recommendation that the Board of Adjustment approve this application as a result of the findings that the applicant demonstrates a clear effort to honor the intent of the provision. The applicant made adjustments to come into compliance with safety provisions of the regulations. The applicant maintains good civic design and is in visual harmony with surrounding properties. The applicant has demonstrated that special conditions and circumstances exist. The application demonstrates that this request is the minimum to make reasonable use of the land, and all other variance guidelines have been successfully met by the applicant. Are there
Easy for
any
you to say,
questions?
right? All right. Thank you, Sarah. You guys have any questions for Sarah? Is there anybody here signed up to speak for the Housing Authority? If you would step to the mic and give your name for the record, please.
Hi, Ira Weimer, HTW Architects. The Housing Authority applied for a grant for security, and they got that grant, and they feel like this would be the best way to spend those grant dollars, would be to make that front area secure.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Commissioners, any questions for Sarah? Or what is your pleasure?
I move we approve this variance.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this variance request. All those in favor acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carried. Okay. Item number 3. Clarify the zoning designation for property located at 600 block of West 3rd Place, submitted by City of Russellville. Sarah, you got a staff report on that?
Yes, sir. So this is a zoning boundary verification for property, like you had stated, on West 3rd, between a C4 zone property and what has now been identified as an RO property. This is existing vacant property located between RO and C4. It's located just south of the First Baptist Church, and it's beside the 2 adjacent properties. All other properties in the area are zoned R3. The Board of Adjustment is authorized to interpret zoning district boundaries when there is uncertainty about the exact limits of these boundaries, or when discrepancies arise between the actual street or property lines and those depicted on the zoning district map. During review of the zoning for the adjacent property, which the adjacent property had applied for a zone change, which prompted a little bit of research, and we found that in 1992 or 93, that property had previously been changed, which is when this was identified for inconsistencies in the current zoning map. Since you all hold the authority to address discrepancies, this application is presented to you for your review and consideration. So in 1976, as indicated on the colorful map on the bottom, it was zoned R3. And then in 1988, the zoning map indicated that this property was zoned RO. But then in 1994, the zoning map indicated that the property had been reverted to R3. And then when the dental office they constructed their parking lot onto the adjacent property, which indicates some sort of level of understanding that maybe it was commercial-ish in nature, either C4 or RO. So during our comprehensive review, we found Ordinance 1029, which rezoned 319 South Glenwood to C4 on April 8, 1982, and ordinance 1493, which designated 501 West Third Place as RO on March 9th. I'm sorry, I had the year wrong, 1995. This request is to verify the accuracy of the zoning map and clarify that boundary between the C4 and the RO zone. So really, what is the zoning of this area that's in question? Is it that RO that was originally shown on the 1988 map? Or is it R3? Should it have been C4? Trying to get your determination on this. Considering, like, as if it's a zone change, we looked at what the requirements are to consider a zone change. It's in line, compatible with the future and current uses with either zoning category. The comprehensive plan does show that it is feasible to consider that the 1988 zoning map could be accurate, depicting this property as RO. And then with no evidence of subsequent rezonings identified, there's not really a value or income potential because it does appear that at some point prior to 1988, the property had been zoned RO. So we would like you all to confirm that the correct zoning on the parcel would be that as shown as the 1988 zoning map of RO. As a result of the findings that the 1988 map showed that the zoning was RO, staff could not confirm that a rezone occurred to remove that zoning classification. The RO zone is in line
Can I
with
stop
the-
you right there real quick? The
sir.
staff could not confirm. Explain that, please.
I looked through every single zone change.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, you can't.
Literally,
It's-
I searched all of the ordinances online and looked for a zone change. And I looked at, I can't tell you how many different ones, and I looked at some of them twice to confirm when the zoning, I was trying to find first where it changed to RO. Honestly, not able to locate that, but I was not either able to locate where it was changed away from RO. And that's where I couldn't confirm that the zoning, if we assume that the 1988 map is correct, I couldn't find an item where it removed that designation.
Right.
And then the proposal aligns with Reimagine Russellville 2040. All things for you all to consider. Do you have any questions for me?
Does the property owner own both parcels there?
From what I can tell, the property owner does own both parcels. There is some uncertainty as if it's the dental clinic or the RO zoned property. But it's, the latest understanding is it's the dental clinic owns that entire area.
Can you define RO?
RO is residential office, so it's a commercial style use. C4 is neighborhood and quiet business. So they're both residential in neighborhood nature, commercial in nature. RO has a little bit more residential features to it.
It's got a flexibility.
It does have some flexibility, yes.
But the dental office is C4.
The dental office is C4, yes, sir.
I make a motion to leave it as RO.
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to keep the property as an RO. All those in favor, acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Any other business when we are adjourned?